Hey there, friends. Brad Kolodner here, and I'm excited to be playing some bluegrass for you today. I'm just going to get started with some music as you tune in. Thanks for being here. I ain't gonna work on the railroad. I ain't gonna work on the farm. Gonna lay around the shack till the mail train gets back. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. Roll in my sweet baby's arms. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. Gonna lay around the shack till the mail train gets back. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. I know your parents don't like me. They keep me away from your door. If I had my life to live over, wouldn't go there anymore. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. Gonna lay around the shack till the mail train gets back. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. Where were you last Friday night while I was standing in the jail? Walking the streets with another man, no one to go my bail. Roll in my sweet baby's arms. Roll in my sweet baby's arms. Gonna lay around the shack till the mail train gets back. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. Roll in my sweet baby's arms. Gonna lay around the shack till the mail train gets back. I'll roll in my sweet baby's arms. Gonna lay around the shack till the mail train gets back. Roll in my sweet baby's arms. All right now. That's an old bluegrass song called Roll in My Sweet Baby's Arms, one of my favorite ones to sing and play with my band. My name's Brad. Hi there, friends. Thanks so much for tuning in this Saturday morning for the Family Jam, coming to you every Saturday through Strathmore's streaming Facebook page to get us all excited about different styles of music. And today we'll be focusing on bluegrass. Now, I was a Strathmore artist in residence back in 2014. So I went through the program as banjo with my main instrument, but I also play other instruments, and we will go through all of those instruments today that you find in a classic bluegrass band. And I will be taking some questions, so feel free to ask questions as we're going along. And if you have any comments, definitely jump on in and post them here, and we'll try to get to them throughout the program here this morning. So we'll just start off right at the beginning of bluegrass, which is one of my favorite styles of music to play. And it was founded way back in the 1940s, maybe back when some of your grandparents were born. But it's a really uniquely American style of music, and it's played all over the world these days. In fact, I've toured with my bands all over the place, and there are people who love this music everywhere you go now. But bluegrass itself, the word bluegrass, is a reference to the first bluegrass band that was formed way back in the 1940s. Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys. And bluegrass is the name of the state of Kentucky, the Bluegrass State is what they call it. And that's where that name comes from, out of Kentucky. I wonder if some of you have been there. I just played a concert there a few weeks ago. right before all of this, and had a great time. There's a lot of great music out there in Kentucky, and we'll talk about where this music comes from, how it grew over the years. But this music comes from all sorts of different styles of music, from blues, jazz, Appalachian, and African music as well. And you're probably wondering, how in the world did I get started playing this instrument here, which I call the banjo, and what is really a beautiful sounding instrument. And that's actually our first vocab word of the day, banjo. And it's a very strange word. It actually, this instrument here is a strange instrument too, because first of all, it has a drum for a head instead of a wooden body. Like a lot of instruments, a lot of stringed instruments have wooden bodies, but this one has a drum head. And then it has this, what we call the neck here. And what's cool about this instrument is that it has 5 strings. So it has these 4 long strings, and then it has this short string sticking out of the side of the neck. So that's called our drone string, and that just plays along while I'm playing. So as you heard me playing that song, you might have noticed this string was just chugging along. So that drone is always there, and it creates a lot of sound. And anyway, this is one of the essential bluegrass instruments, and it has roots all the way back to Africa. There are folks in Africa today playing instruments that kind of look like this, and I'll do a little demonstration here of the African root of this instrument here, the banjo. And I'm going to pick up my gourd banjo, this one here that's hanging on the wall. This is going back to the early days of the banjo. And this is a beautiful instrument. It's kind of like my other banjo. As you can tell, it has a drum head, but it's quite a bit different. And it's made out of a gourd, which is basically just a squash or like a pumpkin. But it's just a hollowed out gourd, and still kind of smells like a rotten vegetable. But it's a really beautiful sounding instrument. So I'll play you a song here. This is one that I like to play in my band with my father. So I got into this music because my father plays music, and I grew up around it. And when I was a teenager, I picked up the banjo and fell in love with this kind of music. So I play in a band with him, and we just go by our names, Ken and Brad Kolodner. And this is one of our favorites to play. It's called Reuben's Train. Now, as I'm playing this one, just notice how it's similar to that other song I played, that first one, Roll in My Sweet Baby's Arms, but it's got a much more mellow kind of sound with these different type of strings. It's got this gourd head, which creates a very different kind of tone. And it sounds like this. Here we go. Reuben had a train from England to Spain. He couldn't get no letters from his home. Whoa, me, oh Lordy my. He couldn't get no letters from his home. There you go. Right as I was getting cooking there, that was Reuben's Train, and played on my gourd banjo, sort of the predecessor to the modern day banjo that I started this whole set off with, and like the ones that are hanging up here behind me. And by the way, I'm coming to you from my house in Baltimore, my little row house, townhouse up here, and in my what I call my banjo palace with all my banjos surrounding me. But this is my gourd banjo. And if you have any questions about anything we're talking about, the gourd, the banjo, bluegrass, feel free to comment, send them in, and I'll try to get to them at the end. Where does this go? Up here. All right. So we'll now go on to another critical instrument in your bluegrass band. And that brings us to our next vocab word of the day. And that is fiddle. Some of you might be familiar with what a fiddle is, but basically a fiddle, another critical part of your bluegrass band, and it looks just like a violin, right? That's because it is a violin, but we just call it a fiddle because of the way that we play it. The instrument itself is no different than a violin. You can play classical music on this, although I do not play much classical music. I did start out with the cello. That was my first instrument way back in the day, but I've since moved to the banjo and other stringed instruments. But this here is another critical piece of your bluegrass band. And so the fiddle is really the term we use for the style of music that you play on it. So when we play the fiddle, we're usually playing very danceable, up-tempo, fast tunes that a lot of these tunes that we play in this kind of music in bluegrass come from Ireland and Scotland and other places around the world as well. A lot of these melodies that we hear in bluegrass music come from Ireland and Scotland. And I'm going to play a tune here on the fiddle, just to give you a sense of what this instrument sounds like. I wish I had my full band here so we could all play together, but just imagine I'm surrounded by all the other instruments. And I'll do a little tune here that we play quite a lot up here with my pals in Baltimore at our local jam, which is our next vocab word. And I'll explain what that is in just a second. Here's a little bit of one of my favorite tunes. It's called Fly Around My Pretty Little Miss. You're all welcome to dance along on this one, as this is dance music, and this is a great tune that we hear at a lot of dances for this kind of music. So here it goes. There you go. All right, that's called Fly Around My Pretty Little Miss, playing it here on my fiddle. And doesn't this music just make you want to dance? That's how I got so excited about this music, was how it just made me want to tap my feet, bob my head, move around. It's a style of music that goes back hundreds of years, and it's always been paired with dance. And we'll get into that a bit later. But anyway, this is my fiddle, and I love playing this. I picked up the fiddle when I was in college, And it's really just such a fun instrument, and has a great, powerful sound. And commonly, the fiddle and the banjo are paired together, and you play those two when you're doing bluegrass, or what I like to call old time music. And those are sort of the critical components of a band. And so when you're playing those two together, it brings us to my favorite part of this kind of music, our next vocab word, which is jam. Now, we are here doing the Saturday mornings with Strathmore family jam, and jam is our vocab word for today, but more in the sense of what I would call a bluegrass jam. And when you play in a jam, that's when you have multiple people playing together, playing the same songs, and you can be jamming on your porch, you can jam in your yard, you can jam at home or out in the woods under some trees. I've jammed in all those kind of places with folks from all over the world, and it's one of the core pieces of bluegrass, and that's the idea of jamming and sharing this music together, being able to play all as one band. And you don't necessarily have to know each other, you don't have to even speak the same language, but if you sit down and you both play bluegrass, chances are you're going to have some songs in common. And that's one of the most special things about this kind of music. There's just a common, what I call the common repertoire. There's a certain number of tunes that everybody knows, certain number of songs that everybody plays. They're called standards. And I've made friends all over the world when I've been on tour or traveling in places like Argentina or Israel or Australia, Ireland. I've played music in all those places with people who I've never met before. Some of them don't even speak the same language, but because we all play bluegrass, we've got some songs in common, and we can sit down and play. And it's a really beautiful thing. So let's go through all the instruments in a classic bluegrass band. So we've heard the banjo, we've heard the fiddle. Now we're going to move on to, you've probably all seen this, the guitar. Now this is, I'm not going to play much on this. It's not my main instrument, but I do love playing it. And it's one of the instruments in the band that sometimes the singer will play guitar, and sometimes the guitar is used as a rhythm instrument, strumming along, keeping good time for everybody. Let's see, what's a good one? I was born in East Virginia, North Carolina I did go. There I met a fair young lady, and her name I did not know. Oh, her hair was dark and curly, and her cheeks were rosy red. On her breast she wore white lilies, where I long lay my head. So that's the guitar, just a little sample of it. And now we'll go, let's see, what's another common bluegrass instrument? It's this little guy here, which is called the mandolin. It kind of looks like the violin, right? It's got a similar body shape, as you saw. It's kind of, it's actually, the strings are tuned the same way as the violin. It's very similar in size, but it plays sort of a different role. It plays a lot of rhythm as well, it's a very tiny instrument. It's got this really bright sound. I'm not really the best at mandolin, but it is really fun to play. Another critical instrument that was actually played by the founder of bluegrass, Bill Monroe. That was his main instrument, was the mandolin, the one who came up with this genre. So here it goes. There you go. That's the mandolin, and it's got 8 strings. So instead of the 4 strings like you have on a violin, it's got 8. So, okay, let's see. Where to now? Oh, yes, one of my favorite instruments in a band, and we're going to have to expand to the screen here because this doesn't fit in the frame. But I'm going to show you another really important instrument in bluegrass. Maybe you've seen one of these before. It's like a whole big piece of furniture. But this is called the upright bass, and it's huge. It doesn't even fit in the frame. It's so enormous. It's like a fiddle that has just been totally blown up into this huge, almost there we go. You can see the whole thing and you can't even see me. So here is a little bit of the bass, if I can even fit into the frame with this thing. But it's really cool. It's a very low sound, and it really keeps time for the band, for the bluegrass band. It sounds like this. Go. All right. Again, not the instrument that I'm most proficient on, but I do love playing the bass when there's an opportunity in a jam to play bass because it keeps time and it's such a powerful low sound. And you've noticed maybe that all these instruments that we play in bluegrass are acoustic and they're all stringed instruments. So we call these bands sometimes a string band, which brings us to our next term of the day, which is solo. And that's something that happens in bluegrass that really makes this style so unique. That's when you're playing a song and in between, actually, let me play this other banjo since I've got more of these. And as we're winding down on time, please remember that you're welcome to ask questions, and I'll try to get to those at the end as we're going along here about these instruments, about bluegrass, and the word that we're working on now is called solo, and that's what happens during a song when somebody finishes singing, and then it's time for an instrument to step forward and take a solo. What really makes bluegrass so interesting is that you have the singing parts, and then you have the instrumental parts, and those two are really important pieces. So let's say I'm singing a song. Work all week in the noonday sun, 15 cents when Saturday comes. Going to a dance to have some fun. Why don't you get away, lazy John? Lazy John, lazy John. Why don't you get your day's work all done? You're in the shade and I'm in the sun. Why don't you get away, lazy John? Here's a solo. I got a gal, she lives down the road. Her eyes are crooked and her legs are bowed, but we sure have a lot of fun. Why don't you get away, lazy John? Lazy John, lazy John. Why don't you get your day's work all done? You're in the shade and I'm in the sun. Why don't you get away, lazy John? So those little instrumental bits where I'm playing it on banjo and not singing, we call those solos in bluegrass. And that's a really important way of expressing yourself and sharing your own creative ideas with the group. And while you're soloing, you don't necessarily have to play it the same way every time. One of my favorite things about this is being able to change the way that I'm playing the song a little bit. It really allows for a lot of creativity. You kind of make it up as you're going along. We do that in our daily lives when we're drawing or painting or making up a story or something. It taps into our creative sides. And in music, in bluegrass, when we're making up a new little melody, we call that a solo. But really what you're doing, the act of that is improvising. It's our next vocab word. And it's one of my sort of the essential pieces of this music is taking a solo and improvising and coming up with your own spin on the song. It's really, I think what's so nice about this style of music is that, you can share it with your friends, you can play with other folks, you can play with your family, you can play it with friends, you can play with people you haven't met before, and you can put your own creative stamp on it, and you can really be yourself when you're playing this music. And that's really why I enjoy playing it so much. So we're almost out of time. If you have any questions, please let me know. Be happy to answer them for you. And I'd like to sing you a song now that is really one of the, I think it's a fitting song for these days. It comes from a great songwriter who lived here in Maryland named Ola Belle Reed, and she wrote this one, and it's, I think, a fitting song. It's called I've Endured. And it's a really classic song that if you were to go to any jam around the country, any bluegrass jam, they would know this song, and they would probably be able to play it along with you. And that's, I think, again, why it's so much fun, because there's so many songs that we all have in common in this style of music. And it really makes it just super enjoyable from a sharing perspective. All right, so let's see here. We're going to do a little bit of I've Endured. Okay, here it goes. I'm going to retune my banjo here as we move along. I'm going to try to get to some of these questions because I see that they've been coming in. So let's see as we're going along here. And thanks again to Betty, Scott, and Beth, and Elena, and all the folks at Strathmore for helping put this together. This has been super fun and really enjoyable experience, despite being home here at my place, being able to share some of these tunes with everybody as I try to load these questions, which for some reason aren't loading on my computer. So anyway, I'm going to play this song as we head out. But the Strathmore family is wide and welcoming and very open, and really appreciate the opportunity to get to introduce all these different instruments to you and share some of my favorite components about this music that I love, bluegrass. And if you're interested, I have a new album that came out just a few weeks ago, actually. Like I said, I play in a band with my dad, Ken, and we perform together quite regularly. And we released a new album it was about March 13th. It's almost a month ago now. And it's called Stony Run, named after a little stream that runs by my house. And here it is. And it's available on our website. You can just go to bradkolodner.com. I believe that's in the description here. And I hope you can stay in touch too. I live here in the area and perform quite a bit, and would love to get to share some of this music with you in person when we're all out there again, playing concerts and sharing this music. Experiencing this music live is really what makes it so special. And being in the room with other people playing this music, feeling the energy between the performers as they're playing is really cool. So anyway, here we go with one of my favorite bluegrass songs. It's called I've Endured, from the great Ola Belle Reed. Here goes. Many years ago, I've climbed hills and valleys through all the rain and snow. I've seen the lightning flashing, I've heard the thunder roll. I've endured, how long must one endure? Summer and on into the fall, too many mouths to feed, could not blow us all. I was sent to church on Sunday to learn the golden rule. I've endured, how long must one endure? I've lived with the poor, I've seen many a heartache, there'll be many more. I've lived, loved, and sorrowed, been through success's door. I've endured, I've endured. How long must one endure? I've endured, I've endured. How long must one endure? There you go. I've endured from the great Ola Belle Reed, and that's a song I recorded on my previous album with my father, Ken. I also play in a band called Charm City Junction, and that's our latest album, Duck Pin. That's available on our website, charmcityjunction.com. So a couple questions that came in, I'd like to get to those. Somebody asked, what is my favorite banjo to play? That's a really tough question to answer. But this one right here, the one that I've been playing, that's my main instrument. It even has this little star that I put on the banjo to see that little temporary tattoo. Not that I advise putting temporary tattoos on valuable instruments, but I don't know why. I just wanted that little touch on there. But so this is probably my favorite instrument to play. This banjo has been with me for years. I've taken it all over the world, and it's a very special instrument for me, and I love playing it. But that said, I do love playing my gourd banjo. That's probably the one that I'll sit down and play when I'm just looking for something to do, looking to play an instrument. I'll frequently pick this up. I think it's got just such a warm, lovely, deep sound, just a really pleasant tone, and that really is just very, I don't know, just feels good to play this instrument. It's got this really lovely, mellow sound. So I'd say that's probably my other favorite banjo to play. It's really hard while I'm sitting here in front of them to pick a favorite. That wouldn't be fair. But I do like to play this one as well. I've got some other banjos around too. In fact, there's this big one right here behind me. This was built in 1920. It's kind of amazing. This is a really old vintage banjo, and this is a pretty new banjo over here. This was built just about a year or two ago by a great builder here in the DC area named Kevin Enoch. There was another question about how tall the bass is, and that's a good question. Let's see here. What do we have? I think it's probably about, I don't know, with the end pin, which is the little piece on the bottom sticking out. This right here. I don't even know. It's probably like 6 feet tall. Doesn't this just look ridiculous? It's taller than me, and I'm 6 feet. So, yeah, I'd say with the little pin sticking out of the bottom, probably about 6 feet. Another question out there, one of my favorite bluegrass bands right now. Some of my favorite bands, so a great way to find out about some of my favorite music is by tuning into my radio show. And I host a bluegrass and old-time music program on Bluegrass Country Radio, which you can listen to online, bluegrasscountry.org. And I host a show every Wednesday and Friday from 12 to 3. So you can stream that online, bluegrasscountry.org. All this stuff can be found on my website too, which is bradkolodner.com. But some of my favorite bands right now that play bluegrass, well, I'd say one of my favorite young bands is a group out of Toronto. They're called the Slow Can Ramblers. I love them. Super good band, Slow Can Ramblers. And then there's a really, they aren't quite bluegrass, but they are heavily influenced by bluegrass and roots music. And they're out of North Carolina called Mandolin Orange. They're probably one of my favorite bands these days that can certainly play bluegrass, but they play a lot of original music kind of steeped in that style. So Mandolin Orange, another one of my favorites. I'm looking at my all the latest CDs that have come in for my radio show. There's some classic bluegrass bands like Allison Krauss and Union Station that I just never get enough of. Blue Highway is a great bluegrass band that's out there. That's a pretty straight ahead bluegrass band that writes some amazing songs. But there's so many great groups out there. I think the best way to find out about those is by tuning into the radio station where I host the show, and it's on 24/7, bluegrasscountry.org. All right. Well, I think, okay, let's see. One more question. Which country outside the U.S. plays the most banjo?
Well, that's a tricky one. I don't know for sure, but I would probably have to say it's if you're talking about like bluegrass banjo and the style that I play, probably would be England. That would probably be the next place. There's a big hotbed for bluegrass and roots music over there in Europe, and England has a whole circuit of bluegrass and old time music festivals. So that'd probably be the one that has the most banjo outside of the United States. But of course, if you go to Africa, you will see folks playing instruments that kind of resemble the early roots of banjo. And so that's always a really fascinating place to sort of explore some of the origins of banjo and bluegrass music. Well, thanks so much. If you have any other questions, feel free to write them and I will try to get to them later. And I appreciate you tuning in and letting me explain all these different instruments to you and why I love playing bluegrass. Just to summarize, this style of music brings me so much joy, mostly because I can play it with my friends and share this music with people I really enjoy being around. So I hope you all get a chance to maybe play some bluegrass one day or go to a concert, go to a jam, just experience what it's like to be around this music live and in person. There's so much more to say. I barely touched the surface, but I hope you all enjoyed this. And I'll say so long for now. I'm Brad Kolodner. And this has been the Family Jam, which is here every Saturday through Strathmore's Facebook page. There's a different style of music represented every week. So tune back in for the next few Saturdays here for these programs. So thanks again to Betty and Elena and Beth and everybody at Strathmore for having me. And I'll say so long. Have a great weekend, everybody.